I'm not the biggest fan of how stock D20 fantasy handles the monk, specifically how anything that is vaguely Asian and able to throw a punch or a kick gets lumped underneath the heading of monk, even though the cultures that the monk comes from definitely have things that are like fighters and rogues and would be able to throw a punch with at least as much force as the monk is able to do, and that's not even mentioning something like the barbarian that should be able to Hulk smash. I also feel like my core fantasy of what it would mean to be a monk doesn't mesh well with the stock D20 fantasy Dungeons and Dragons gameplay loop. As your power kill slams into Lathril, the pit fiend screams with fury as green energy rips it apart and is sent screaming in an infernal nova back into hell. Here is the loot off the treasure chest that you guys were trying to get to, so you can split it up and everybody level up, and we'll meet again next week. What do you mean, what do we do next week? We take all the loot and the abilities that we have, we go on another quest to go into another dungeon to defeat another big bad evil guy, and we keep doing that until we eventually hit level 20 and we tire of these characters. We start over with new level 1 characters and do it all over again. I mean, sure, when I say it that way, it sounds dull and repetitive, but I've been playing tabletop role-playing games for over 25 years and I still love that gameplay loop. Hi, I'm James, and on this channel I talk about things that I think about, plan, and plot for my tabletop role-playing games, and today, that's the monk. The monk as an archetype doesn't fit well with this gameplay loop because it comes from a very different place than many of the other classes. It comes primarily from Buddhist traditions that emphasize discipline, ethical conduct, meditation, withdrawing from the world to seek self-enlightenment, and that doesn't really mesh well with the mercurial, often morally flexible nature of most adventuring parties. Even if your adventuring party is more of the Lord of the Rings, go save the world from the big evil, that doesn't really mesh well with the withdrawal from the world and seek self-enlightenment. If Aragorn was a monk and they turn to him and say, "Do you have my sword?" he'd say, "No, I'm busy meditating. I'm off here doing what I need to do to reach the level of a Buddha, and that doesn't really give me time to go and help you drop a ring into a fire. Sorry about that." But you want to play a monk, and I want to play a monk, and your players want to play a monk, and that means that we need to fudge the reality of what the monk actually draws from to put them in a place that is closer to what might actually go on an adventure. I'm currently planning for my next campaign because my current one is wrapping up, which, let's be honest, that actually probably means there's more like a year left of playing that game. One of the things that I do when planning for a campaign is take the generic fantasy offered by a player's handbook, whether that's Dungeons and Dragons, Draw Steel, Daggerheart, whatever, and retool it so that it better fits my world. And since the players are going to experience my world through the lenses of their character classes, that seems like a good place to start. The monk is certainly not the only one where I feel like the mechanics, class fantasy, the flavor clash. It is the one that bothers me the most. The monk as a class is expected to represent everything from the Shaolin monk to the Buddhist priest to the yogis of India and even like shinobi from Japan. And those cultural touchstones are as disparate as Robin Hood is from Beowulf and Joan of Arc. And we don't lump them together under one class. Fiction, by definition, does have to generalize. There is no way a work of fiction can contain all the multitudes of ideas, experiences, viewpoints, cultures that exist within actual reality. Under the best circumstances, fiction uses that broad brush to allow more people to see themselves in the fiction and engage in the fantasy world. But if that brush gets too broad, you lose the definition that made the thing that you were trying to represent unique, that allowed people to see themselves as that thing. The monk originally built off Shaolin monks, and the warrior of the open hand reinforces that fantasy. But as you get other people adding into the hobby and go, "I want to represent something like the shinobi of Japan, but I don't feel like they're rogues," you get things like the Warrior of Shadow. The Warrior of Mercy references chakra manipulation. And the Warrior of the Elements, I think they were going for Avatar: The Last Airbender, which is excellent and already a melange of Asian cultures, but the class comes off as Punch Sorcerer. But now that I say that, Punch Sorcerer is not an inaccurate representation of Avatar: The Last Airbender, so I guess I gotta let that one pass. If we were building a Wuxia or Legend of Five Rings settings from scratch, we just adjust the base classes. We take something like the Warrior of Shadow and just put it on the rogue. A rogue with no armor is a shinobi. We take the Warrior of Mercy and say, well, that's just a cleric, but with no armor. The Warrior of Elements is a druid with, you guessed it, no armor. But I'm not doing that because my world has knights and monks. I need a place for both of these. Why did the people develop these traditions, these ways of defending themselves against the dangers of the world? There's got to be more that's binding the class of monk together than just they punch stuff and they don't wear armor. The monk gains mastery over themselves and their abilities through discipline, meditation, and rigorous training. There is often a philosophical, maybe even a religious background to any character that we would reasonably point to and say, yeah, that's a monk. The archetypical monk does not externalize their power. They get it from themselves, or they go and achieve some form of enlightenment, and now it is part of themselves. With every other character archetype that has become a class, there is, to my mind, a connection between the character that made the archetype and an object, a thing that they're going to go quest for, obtain, they're going to hold. Thor and his Mjolnir, Gandalf and his staff, Orpheus and his lyre, Roland and Durandal. It's not even just Western culture. Honjo Shingenja has the Honjo Masmune, and even the Monkey King, who is a monk, has Jingubang. Despite the fact that the Monkey King clearly has a weapon and uses it, I don't think using a weapon is core to most people's fantasy of playing a monk. The monk is the weapon. They should be punching things. They're more like Bruce Lee. But even though you could separate the weapon from the character fantasy, I'm not sure that you can maintain the fantasy of being a monk and separating the need to go do discipline training. A swordsmaster definitely goes and does discipline training, but I don't think that's core to that fantasy. I think if we have some vision in our heads of playing a stand-in for Aragorn, we're not imagining standing around in a field and doing sword forms with Narsil to be part of that fantasy. But it is for the monk. If Goku has an opponent that he cannot beat, he trains. Everybody else holds off the Saiyans, Majin Buu, Frieza, whoever it is, while Goku goes and visits King Kai. King Kai teaches him something, and once Goku masters it, he has achieved a higher state and he can come back and kick ass. If Aang cannot beat his opponents, then he needs to sit around and meditate on what it means to be the Avatar until he reaches self-enlightenment. But everybody else wants to go on an adventure. I want to run an adventure. The monk player wants to go on an adventure. So how do we fit this monk idea of discipline, training, an aesthetic life up in the mountains into the normal D&D gameplay loop? You might be thinking, downtime. The monk has gone on an adventure. They now have experiences. They need to meditate on the nature of those experiences. Maybe they need to pay someone for training. We used to do that in older editions. It's a downtime activity. I think that's a good, reasonable thematic solution, but I also think it robs the player. I want the downtime activities to belong to the player's motivations for their character. I don't want to have to tell them, no, you can't go off with other characters and spend your downtime carousing or running kingdoms or making magic items. You chose to play a monk, and that means that you're spending your time training so that you can master your inner self. Please describe another training montage. I also don't want to do downtime if none of the other players are going to engage in it. If none of the other players have personal ambitions for their characters and I am putting it in just so the monk has something that they can use to go and get training, then it is a thing that is just there for the monk. You should, in theory, be able to tell them, your character spent 4 leisurely months in Dunhane drinking and partying their butts off, while Zin is off in the snow-covered mountains training. But players, even those that had no ambition to do anything in downtime and don't physically experience the time skip, often object to saying 4 months pass. They feel like their character should have been doing something, they just don't know what it is. So then it would ideally happen in the adventure, not between adventures. And it would be nice if it enriched the role-playing opportunities for the player so that they could understand what it is to be a monk in this world, to help with some of the world building. I've got 2 ideas to share. One of them I thought would be really cool, but it didn't work in that context, though I did find a use for it, and we'll talk about that. And the other one is working for me currently. There's probably a lot of ways to do this. If you've got ideas, then please share them in the comments. These are just my ideas. They work for me. Maybe yours are better. I'd use them. One of the classic tropes in martial arts and martial arts adjacent fiction is that a character will have to participate in some sort of a duel. Often this is to prove their worth or to prove their inadequacies and that they need training, but doing so in a party-based game is difficult. If you put a character in some sort of an arena where they're going to face off one-on-one, gladiator combat, monk, or otherwise, you will often find that the other members of the party will, well, they'll cheat. They'll start casting buff spells on their friend, or they'll cast debuff spells on the other person. They'll do things to the arena, do something to try to help their friend win. Because the players want to play the game, regardless of what the characters in world are experiencing. And in a game sense, maybe the monk player is all right with it because they want their character to win. But in a narrative sense, the monk character should not be okay with this cheating. I mean, unless they're playing an evil monk, in which case I guess they're fine with cheating. And regardless of what the player character monk thinks about it, the master, the sensei, would not be all right with the cheating. And if they're of a level that could teach something to the player character, then they should be of a level to detect that these other people are cheating. And now they're definitely not going to share their secrets with the monk player character. So we need to find some way to isolate the player character so they can participate in this challenge. And that is always difficult because anytime you separate and focus on one character, you start losing the attention of all the other characters. So whatever we're doing, it needs to be very quick. Ideally, it's cinematic and exciting so that the other player characters are engaged in what is going on.
More this fighting Neo.
I like it. It's very cool. It's very narrative, and it sucks. It doesn't work for me. At least not within context of actually getting the monk training. Because in narratives where this kind of thing happens, the point of this encounter, of this duel, is for the novice to lose. If Luke shows up on Dagobah and Yoda tells him, "If training from me you'd have, then lift X-Wing from swamp you must," and Luke said, "Okay," and then just went and did it, then what's left for Yoda to teach him? Quite a lot, honestly, because that is not what the Force is about, lifting X-Wings out of the swamp, but it would certainly ruin the Hermit Master mystique. Where this thing kind of happens in narratives, the point of the thing is, again, for the character to learn a lesson. They're going to fail at this duel so that we know where the character is weak, and then the master is going to help them overcome that weakness. But in a game kind of sense, players don't typically want to engage in a situation where their character has the deck stacked against them so that they can lose so their character learns a lesson. Where I do think it works is in setting up a nemesis for a particular character. Something that is going to be part of the long story arc for this particular individual's character. And I would start by absolutely having a conversation with the player of that character to make sure that they know what they're signing up for. Hey Zin, how would you feel about your character having a nemesis? Maybe they're just ahead of you in training and it's like a friendly rivalry. Maybe it's something more villainous than that. Maybe they slew your master and stole the secret scrolls that show the final technique and you're after them to avenge your master. Something along those lines. Just keep in mind, the point of this character would not be for you to defeat them from the outset. I want to be able to deploy them at different moments during the campaign so that we can keep your personal character arc going and not lose it in the overarching campaign. And because of that, the character, this NPC, would be stronger than your character. You are going to lose to them, at least at the very beginning. And then over time, you'll do better and better. The point of this character isn't for you to beat them up right away and get your secret and get your end game ability. It's to show how your character has progressed as a monk. I think from a mechanical sense, a normal battle with ACs and hit points and attacks and initiative it feels wrong to me. It doesn't emphasize enough about being a monk. There's no reason that a barbarian or a fighter or a rogue couldn't potentially participate in this and not come away with a victory, and that's not the goal. This should emphasize being a monk. And that means I want to emphasize their monk levels, their wisdom, their dexterity, their strength, all those kind of iconic monk abilities. I definitely want to have it in places that are evocative of being a monk. Over a waterfall, in complete darkness, in temples where there are hanging vines, or on the top of bamboo trees. Doing this, I would have a bunch of other mechanics based on where the duel is. If you're in a poison field, there would be things that exhaust you. If there's fire, there's additional fire damage going off, and you have to dodge that. But just for a moment, let's take my basic duel of a log over a waterfall. You're trying not to fall into the drink. Each monk is going to roll 3 checks. There's no initiative here. It all happens at the same time. I'm playing the nemesis. The other player is obviously playing their monk. We roll 3 checks. One of them is going to be insight, then acrobatics, and then athletics. If you win the contested insight roll, then you get advantage. You get to re-roll one of your other rolls. If you win the acrobatics roll, that becomes kind of damage reduction. That's how much you're able to dodge and block whatever blow is about to come. And then re-roll the strength damage, athletics damage. And that is how much damage goes through. That damage is applied first to your acrobatics roll, and anything that's remaining is going to go through to your hit dice, your monk level. That's how many hits you can take in this kind of Street Fighter combat. At low levels, the player is probably like level 1 or level 3 when this first duel happens, whereas the opponent is like twice or 3 times that, like level 7 to level 10. So it is very, very unlikely that the player is going to beat the Nemesis. The Nemesis is going to wipe the floor with them. Eventually they will tie, and then they will win. They're able to avenge their master, or the Nemesis reveals a secret. Our master and I always knew that you were his true heir. Okay, I'll just dot the world with a bunch of monasteries that the monk can go to whenever they need to go and level up and get their abilities, right? Nope. What do you mean?
Forgot about the other players.
Oh yeah, them. If only the monk needs to go to the monastery so that they can level up and get all their talents, and that's the only reason that they exist, then that's bad. Then that becomes a railroad adventure from one training gym to the next so that they can collect all their monk powers and become the greatest that there ever was. That is not the member of a party, that is a main character. Although if you're running a one-on-one adventure with you and a monk, then that's a perfectly reasonable reason to go adventuring. It actually fits pretty well. But if you've got other members of the party, then you need something else that is going to drive them and want to go to places that these monasteries are. Certainly one of those reasons might be an adventure location, a dungeon. Oh my God, we've been RPing for 3 straight sessions. Uh-oh. Mike over there is getting that look. Better do something fast. Maybe the monastery he's at has a secret. There's a phylactery of an ancient lich in the basement.
Didn't you use that for the last adventure, James?
Damn it, right brain, are you going to help me or not?
Fine. It's behind an ancient door protected by magical seals. Over time, the seals rotted and the lich was able to telepathically lure an apprentice. The apprentice went looking in the dark, stumbled down the stairs, and is now providing the perfect new corpse for the lich to inhabit. Now the lich is turning all the monks into undead minions. Voila, dungeon.
Okay, Mike. Aside from as locations to put a dungeon, monasteries should matter to the world. We think of these things as remote, and sometimes they are, but they're remote for defense. And also because people are loud and annoying and I'm trying to meditate here. Aside from being, just where monks live, they often provide services to nearby communities. They may be spiritual centers for religion. They may defend nearby villages from attack. They may preserve records in a governmental function. Maybe there are centers of scholarship, or they may have a market that sets up for the nearby communities. They're not that dissimilar from what we might see in a European setting, although those monks are known for developing 6-packs of another kind. In each monastery, I add a thing that is unique to that monastery that the monk is going to go and use to train. It is something they're not going to take with them like every other class would, because again, we want to be specific to the monk. It might be something that is a rock, sacred. It contains all the memories of those that trained in its presence. Or it's a set of golden scrolls that have been written by the long-dead master, and its secrets can only be unlocked by those that reach certain tiers of enlightenment. Or maybe it's an incense that is specific to this monastery, and if you inhale it, you will be able to astral project and learn secrets from the universe. Or maybe there are holy pools here that if you sit in them, they will allow you to shed your weakness, and if you face them, you will be able to unlock more and more secrets of self-enlightenment. Then I'm going to add things for the other players. Maybe they're a thing for the players now, maybe for later. If this monastery is a center where the masters go into the astral plane to guard it from extra-dimensional threats, then when the players are facing extra-dimensional threats, I'm hoping that they might say, hey, remember that monastery that we went to that had the masters that fight against extra-dimensional threats? I wonder if they know something about the Githyanki. Then I'm going to add something that ties them back into the community for the other NPCs to reference to try to plant some hooks so that the players know that this thing exists and that they can go visit it. Maybe it's a granary, a graveyard, and an armory, something simple like that, or maybe it's more advanced. Maybe they have some information. Do they keep records, prophecies? Are they a giant library? And then I want to add maybe a secret to this place. Classic ones are that there is an ancient gold dragon that was actually the old master, or that there is a ancient demon lord that is locked inside the shrine inside this monastery. Or maybe they just have the secret to Frangelico. Because I want my world to live and breathe and be a character that I play, that my players are going to explore. And like any character, I want it to have depth. That means that I'm going to go through and tie the classes into the world. I am not keeping the base Dungeons and Dragons monk subclasses because to me, they're like mild salsa. There's no flavor. It's basically tomato sauce with a little bit of garlic that once herded the legendary jalapeno. I want subclasses and classes that ignite my imagination as if I just bit into a ghost pepper. The Kingdom of Lind is very large and very decentralized. It's a bunch of points of lights little towns with one major population center that could be called a city, Tywinin, where the crown is. And it has a history of necromantic power-hungry wizards. The Church of Asia is very powerful here, but is far more concerned with persecuting mages and securing its own political power than going out in the countryside and doing any good, like confronting undead and helping people. That's where the Warriors of Mercy have come from. They have a tradition of going into these forgotten areas and helping where the crown and the faith will not. Their shrines are field hospitals, their churches are graveyards, and their mission is to help any living and destroy any undead. The Warriors of Shadow are part of the defense network for the Elves of the Forest of Mir. Because elves reproduce so slowly, they cannot possibly win in open warfare against things like goblins, orcs, humans, dwarves, giants, dragons. So they must win those battles in the shadows. And the Warriors of Shadows are their trained spies and assassins. A player that is going into the game wanting to play one of these needs to agree to that from the get-go, or maybe they're planning to betray the network, something like that. Once they've agreed, and we've settled that, yes, this is what they're going to do, they're going to get a handler, a contact network, a location of a safe house, and a hit list. It is possible for something other than an elf to be a Warrior of Shadow. Cultivating foreign assets are a key part of a good clandestine organization, but the elves are definitely going to want you to prove your loyalty. The Monk of Elements exists only on the continent of Edrenos, where the people are violently defending their wild lands against encroaching empire. The people there have a close relationship with natural spirits and the druid priests. Think Avatar: The Last Airbender meets Princess Mononoke defending the lands against the Roman Empire. The country of Uldia has been collapsing under its own weight for decades, if not at least a century, and now that the imperial throne cannot protect the larger empire, new forms of protection must be developed. The monks were once just ascetics that lived in the land, dedicating themselves to self-enlightenment and physical perfection under that cause. But now that their lands are being threatened by raiders and demons, they are being put to a new purpose, and the younger generation is starting to question whether just a life of enlightenment and scholarship is worth being destroyed. Often, these walled monasteries are the last line of defense against the depredations of dark forces. Classes like the monk, the paladin, and the bard do not come from nowhere. They come from cultures and what they thought were important. The bard, for example, undoubtedly takes some reference from Orpheus, who in Greek mythology was able to wander into Hades, put Cerberus to sleep, and convince Hades to give him a chance to bring Eurydice back to life through the power of his music and his art alone. What does it say that through his art he was able to accomplish what Hercules could accomplish through muscle? What does it say about the Greeks that they thought these two things were equal in some respect? What does it say about your world if they've developed a monk? Someone that is dedicated to discipline, self-enlightenment, correct actions. What does it say that that culture developed them and not someone else? The generic RPGs like Daggerheart, Drawsteel, Pathfinder, Dungeons & Dragons are kind of generic for a reason. They don't know what world you're playing in. Are you using Daggerheart to play in Galarian? Are you using Drawsteel to play in Greyhawk or Orden or Exandria? They don't know, so they have to kind of satisfy everybody's fantasy. But you don't have to satisfy everybody's fantasy. You only have to satisfy your own and your players. And it is okay if this level of world building is not your cup of tea. You just want to have some fun and roll some dice and kill some monsters and get some loot. Over the course of my channel, I hope I've made that clear that I have a lot of fun with that kind of stuff. But if you want your world to feel lived in, something that breathes, take the classes, tie them to cultures, beliefs, and to conflict, and you will take something that is mild salsa and turn it into something that will fire your players' imagination. Give them something they've never seen before. Until next time, Dungeon Masters, remember you're a player too. Try to have some fun.